Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Erica Kramer. I'm lucky to be a part of the senior living team here at Martin Brothers. Today, we have been coming to you with the 411 live at this time every Tuesday. That started when we did when the COVID situation started back in March. And then we took a little break, and then something happened, and we decided we would use the 411 not for a quick update like we have been doing, but for training purposes. So today it will be about an hour. It's not going to be that quick 10-15 minutes. So just wanted to let you know. Today we're also going to be focusing on finding balance, reopening to visitors while retaining safety. So we're going to go into why we did this. But first I want to let you guys know, because a lot of people are joining us, are excited because you get 1 CEU for CDMs, and extra bonus that you didn't know is since we have Rob Fiore with us, we are going to talk about sanitation. So you're going to get a half of that hour will be a credit for sanitation CEUs, and then the other half will be general. We know it's a little difficult to get those sanitation credits, so we did get one of the half of one in for you guys. So I just wanted to let you know about that. But today for our training, the reason we started the discussion last week of, hey, we need to do training about safely reopening up for nursing homes. If you would have asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have said, they aren't going to open up maybe for the rest of the year. And people who are a lot more experts and in the industry daily and own communities would have agreed with us. Then last week, a lot of states started opening up. And one state in particular kind of did a 180 and went from closed to open. And the next day, people were like, well, last night I could go and have a beer and eat a cheeseburger, so today I want to go see mom. So they showed up at one of our customers' communities thinking they could come in, and they weren't allowed to yet. So then they came to us asking for guidance. What should we be doing now? So we said, okay, if it's happening at one place, it's going to happen more. And it's getting pretty gray now with states opening up. What are senior living communities going to do? So that's why we decided that today we were going to put on this training to help with some considerations for best practices. Then yesterday, in the afternoon at about 4:20, CMS did release some guidelines in a phase process, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, to give guidance on how you should consider to reopen long-term care communities and senior living. Now I will say they do stress working with state and local health officials, the health departments on when this phase process could be or should be implemented. So every state's going to be different. But one thing that we know for sure is that at some point, visitors will be allowed to come in. And we better start thinking about this now. So Rob and I aren't going to sit here and discuss, should you be forced to open up? Should the resident have the right to see the loved one? Or is it your right to keep everyone in your community safe? We're not talking about that today. We're not having a discussion on what's right or wrong. We're saying when the time comes, let's do some discussion now and preparation now on how to be ready. Because things happen pretty quick, very quick.
Absolutely, and we want to make sure that when we do reopen, that not only are we allowing people to come see their loved ones, but they're considerate of the other ones in the facility and keeping them safe as well.
We have a very, very tough situation here, and we definitely realize that. So we have the luxury at Martin Brothers of working with multiple states, multiple customers, and we get to see really good things. And then we get to have experts like Rob, and we get to merge those together and come up with resources and ways to help you and share that. Because you can't be everywhere, but luckily we are virtually everywhere. So with that being said, I should probably introduce Rob. Rob Fiore, I've been calling him the great environmental services Poobah. But really, I guess his title is Solutions Sales Manager. But that really doesn't talk about how much knowledge is packaged up here. If you joined us in March, Rob was the one that had all the expertise on infection prevention and how to do infection control correctly. So we definitely want to revisit some of those techniques, as well as consider how that makes sense now more than ever with this new challenge that we're setting up. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss developing an effective standard of, I'm losing my train of thought, standard operating procedures. We're going to call it SOP. SOP, so that we don't have to say it over and over again. We are also going to discuss how you consider preparing a safe environment. And then, I think very importantly, we are going to discuss communication and implementing everything we have talked about. I just want to once again say these are considerations for best practices. So we are just saying, what about this? What about this? We're trying to really get everything that could go wrong thought about and make sure that we're prepared for every
We want to make sure that we're stimulating your thought processes individually for your particular communities to make sure everyone's going to be different. There's going to be variables in every location. We're just trying to give you some, like you said, considerations, best practices that you could consider implementing or modifying and putting into place.
I do want to also point out that if you went through our HubSpot or registration, if you registered to join us today, a lot of the resources will show you, and we will make note. You will be getting this as an email. We will be sending those out after our discussion today. So if you are signing up and wanting to be a part of this to get your CEUs, because you are a CDM and you need those hours, that will come in the email. But every time we show a resource, we will make note that this is coming to you. You can also reach out to any of your Martin Brothers reps, be it a dietitian or your solutions sales rep that you work with, your sales rep, and ask them for these resources as well. But I just wanted to reassure you, if you signed up through the register button, you will be getting these automatically. All right, did I get everything on our to-do list to talk about in the beginning?
I think you nailed it.
I think so. All right, we should end now. So we listed a lot of things out when we're talking about developing an effective SOP. But that's because we felt like the more answers you have figured out, and the better you're going to be prepared for whatever comes at you. We're not going to be able to figure out every single situation or question or scenario that will happen, but hopefully this will maybe spark like, oh, what about this family member does this? We didn't even think about that. So some of the things to think about as you're developing this is how will visits be scheduled or reserved? I know it just seemed a lot longer than 2 months ago that people could come in at any time, maybe sign in, and just kind of go wherever they wanted and went and saw mom, grandma, grandpa, or dad. That's got to be changed.
And lots of people could go in at the same time.
Oh my gosh, yeah. If every family member came in at once on Mother's Day, that wasn't a problem. So that has to be considered. So how are we going to schedule the visits? Maybe in the beginning we should really consider that. And if we do, how? Do they do it through email, through phone? Who on your staff can be a part of that process so that it's more streamlined? You want to have the communication prior to the visit. Once again, we're going to talk about communicating and implementing again, but consider a part of your SOP that communication prior to your visit. Things to consider are the PPE. Are you going to require them to bring a mask, or are you going to be providing those masks to be safe? If they show up without a mask, will you give them one, or do they have to go get one from their car or wherever they forgot it? Guidelines.
Do you think we'll be booking them throughout the whole day, or would it be better if they maybe selected a period of time during each day that they would welcome visitors?
I think that would make a little more sense, right? To consolidate that time and say in between 1 and 4 or 11 and 2, this is when our visiting hours now are now. Before, it may have been early in the morning until the nighttime shift. You were free to come in. I think we're going to have to consider changing that.
I would agree. I think we're going to want a little extra hands on deck when we start having visitors come back. as we get into this later, you're going to understand why that would be important.
Well, and should every visitor be able to have, or every resident be able to have a visitor at the same time?
I think you're going to want to limit that.
Right, because
I mean, everyone can make their own decisions, but you want to make sure you're protecting as many of the people in your community as possible. So running some type of limitation, I think, makes the most sense.
you know, I also think we need to consider if we're going to limit the amount of visitors and the time, we might want to consider, okay, if someone had a spouse who came every day, can they take up a shift every single day? Or are they only allowed in the beginning?
I think a lot of it's going to depend on the size of your community.
Yep.
The time slot you're going to allow for visitation. Obviously, you want to be fair to everybody there, that they get the chance to see their loved ones as well. So
I agree. Now, are we going to also consider, we kind of talked about this, but how many visitors at the same time? And I think one thing to consider as we discuss, well, you know, is there only 2 people that can visit their loved ones at the same time? Is how many safe areas, which we'll get to identifying
right.
that. But if you only have one location that you've designated for visitors, obviously you might want to consider putting that in place, like only 1 visitor at a time, which is going to be tough for some places that have a lot of people, you know, that you're taking care of. Also, a lot of places, I know one retail store in particular, unless you are 16 and have your driver's license or photo identification, you're not allowed in.
Right. So do we have age restrictions on visitors?
That's something to consider.
Right.
Because it is affecting kids differently. And we all know that I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. I am biased that they are pretty well behaved, but they're 5 and 7. I mean, they're going to sit and touch and walk somewhere. And if I'm trying to have communication with Grandpa, he's nowhere near my grandpa's age. But can I also take care of my 5-year-old
right.
and watch them so they don't go anywhere?
So you're saying maybe we do a limitation on the number of people coming to visit any one person. Maybe we do an age restriction, so maybe we're being smart about saying 16 or older.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when my dad was in a nursing home, I like to bring him, you know, some groceries or, you know, candy or stuff like that.
Bourbon.
That. Can we still do that, do you think?
Well, you know, we did get a little stressed out during COVID when we found out that virus stays on plastic for how long?
2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days. So if we do allow, if you're coming in and you bring me Snickers, because I love Snickers, plug for Snickers, we should charge them for that. If you do bring that in, should we have a process? Yeah, you can bring in Grandma's favorite treat, but it's going to sit here.
Like in a quarantine.
Quarantine. Or we'll take it, we will sanitize the outside of the product safely, correctly, and then you will be able to give it to your loved one at the end of that.
I think that could make good sense.
We talked about who and when and how often, but what about how long? If I haven't seen my loved one for 2 months, I've got to talk to them over the phone or FaceTime. Hopefully you've been doing those things. But it's my first time seeing my mom. I might want to sit there and talk for 2 hours.
Right, but now remember we were talking about having a smaller window for visitation, being considerate of other residents that want visitors as well. So I think something you should consider based on the size and the number of areas you might have for visitors, how long that should be. We're not going to tell you it should only be a half hour, it should only be an hour, but that would be something you definitely want to consider. A lot of you guys know your residents, you know their family members, you know what to anticipate when they're going to want to come back. So having all this communication up front before they get there will eliminate a lot of questions when they come in, like, why can't I do this and why can't I do that?
Exactly.
So.
And if you know your family members and your residents, you might say, hey, we're going to suggest that Rob's mom or Rob's daughter comes in at the last shift, because if she goes a little bit over, no one's coming in after that to see him or see anyone else. You know, you
I
have to
get
be
the special
careful.
treatment.
Well, because I like Rob. You have to be careful, but kind of plan on some of those situations too. Um, okay, we talked about that. What about scheduling things back to back? So if we do spread it out, let's say from 11 to 4, because we've got management there and leadership team and more people there to help. 11 to 4, and we're going to do half hour, and we have 2 spots. So we're going to have 2 spots going at 11, 11:30, 12, 12:30, 1, 1:32, 2:30. Does that make sense?
I would advise against that, and here's why. Because you're going to want to make sure you do proper cleaning and sanitation practices
Yeah.
between each visitation. So maybe you'll start the first, if you have 2 locations, you start one at 11, the next one at 11:15. So when this one ends at 11:30, you have up to 15 minutes to go ahead and do a proper cleaning, disinfecting of all of the area that they're in. Got to remember, we need proper contact time for our disinfectants. So we're going to say on the long case, 10 minutes for that to work before we reopen that visitation room up. So if you went 2 of them at 11, then it would be the end 11:30, not start again at 11:45. Alternating, you can at least maybe get 1 or 2 more visitations.
So speaking of cleaning, Rob, I feel like you guys you and your team maybe developed a special resource for our customers, correct?
We did. So what we did is we developed a task checklist. We did it for public areas in senior living, as well as the dining area and back of the house, a small section of the back of the house. Essentially, it allows you to have the tasks, some of the recommended frequencies as far as when you should be performing that task, and what type of materials or products you're going to need. So like general purpose cleaners, floor cleaners, disinfectants, and that. And then we also referenced a lot of those products that are available through Martin Brothers, including the most important one, the products that kill norovirus and coronavirus down here with the contact times right next to them. So
whichever product you choose kind of dictates how much time you want in between those visitations.
correct. Now I will say, in my 20-some years of experience with senior living, they do a very good job at their cleaning and disinfecting throughout the facilities, but this is just one more resource that facilities and communities can use to make sure that they're checking off those certain areas on a regular basis. Because we all forget about some of those things. We might remember the high touch areas over here, but we may forget them over here. We may forget that coffee bar we have set up for visitors needs more attention, and what do we use to take care of that? So it's a nice resource that would be available to our customers as well.
And I also want to point out, well, first of all, one of the resources you will get sent, but also I feel like moving forward, it's already been talked about that infection control and what your infection prevention program looks like will be very much looked at and focused on. And so the more you can do to prove, the more documentations, the more things you have that are actually not just you saying it, but you proving, well, if you can pull this up and say, hey, this is our cleaning task checklist, and this is what we use, this is what how our team knows that they can do all these things, or what they need to do, what they need to use, how often it's done. And I tell you what, this is a lot more impressive than just a handwritten list, or if you do stand up with your team and you say, hey, you're doing this today and you're doing this today, once again, this just solidifies and proves what you're doing. So I always like to give resources that can help you guys with that documentation, with that aha, if state comes in and questions you.
Well, and let us help be resources for you. If you're not for sure if you've got the best program or procedures in place, we have a way for you to contact us get us involved, have us come in and do some consultations with you, look at your needs, look at what you want to achieve, and let us put our resources to work for you.
That's going to be our final discussion.
Teaser.
Teaser. All right, so we've set up some of these. In the biggest thing, so let's say you've identified a lot of these considerations we talked about. I think it would be a very good idea to now communicate that to your family and your staff and let your residents know, right?
How would we do that?
Well, you could put it all together in a newsletter. You could send an email out. You could have some discussion or put it on your Facebook. Here's our time for visitors. Here's how you do it. Contact us through email or this way. So there's multiple ways, but once again, getting that communication out there and having those answers readily available. So there's no confusion. And if I show up at 9 a.m. with no appointment, well, why can't I come and see Mom? If they were receiving an email, you sent them something, you know that they got that communication.
You still could have people that are going to be out of that communication loop, and you may have to deal with that.
But at least you'll have it ready, and you'll say, well, you must maybe missed what we had put in place, but here is what we are doing to keep not only our residents safe, your mom, your dad, but everyone else safe as well as our staff. So here's what we're having to do. Well, you have it ready to go.
I think it would also be a good idea in that communication is to talk about when you do arrive for your visitation, what happens.
Like a check-in process.
There you go.
Even hotels are changing what that check-in.
They have like barriers. You can't even get right up onto the front desk.
Yeah. And one person goes into the lobby. If my husband's listening, he's chuckling because I'm talking about Vegas. Because I've already been reading how Vegas is going to open. And they're doing a lot of different ways to keep everyone safe. And one of that ways is that check-in process. And I think people need to consider that no matter what industry you're in. What's the check-in process? So I know if you've gone to the doctor recently for non-COVID issues, maybe you took someone in for something else that wasn't a COVID-related issue, you might have stayed in the parking lot and called to gain entrance. That might be an option right now. Call and say, hey, I'm here to visit Rob. I was supposed to have an appointment at 1 o'clock, and then you can consider what's next. Are you going to have an escort come out and take their temperature, check if they have PPE? Consider some of those check-in processes. Are you going to have someone available? And we definitely aren't living in a dream world that you've got all these extra staff who can do all this stuff. But you want to consider, would it be possible and is it safest to have an escort take them to that safe visiting space that we've identified and considered?
Well, if you go into any facility now for, say, an emergency situation, you have to be screened, and I think you have to fill out a questionnaire. Would you still want to have that same type of process for visiting your family members?
Well, I would think to be safe, we would want to not only screen them with questions, take their temp, and then document that. And consider how are we going to keep that on file? Are we going to keep it by day? Are we going to have them sign in and have a sheet per person? Are we going to keep that in a resident file? Are we going to keep it in a daily file?
I think that would be something that each community is going to have to see what works best for them. But it would make sense that they want to have some type of back information from the people that have come in.
Because if you are one of the lucky ones who have stayed COVID-free, and then you do have COVID enter the building, this is a way you can check and see where it came from, what had happened here. So I think those are a couple things, and then signs to reinforce that. I believe we have one. That's not the one. I think we talked about this again. But for example, attention, help us keep safety in check. Please help us keep our residents safe before entering. Be sure you have called from the parking lot to receive check-in instructions and are wearing a mask. Thank you for cooperation. So having this on the door to stop them before they enter so that they read it. Because I don't know about you, but many times, as in Sunday, I was almost up to an essential retail store without my mask. And I gotta go get my mask. So it takes sometimes this on the door as a reminder.
Now, I would say if you do go with some signage like this, which we can help provide, I would say putting that either in a plastic sleeve or laminated so it can be wiped down and disinfected on a regular basis.
True.
You don't want people touching it and staying up there.
And it getting gross, and then you can't disinfect it when it's paper anyway. And we talked about the documentation and filling. I think we kind of covered a lot of things to consider. One thing I didn't point out, guys, it said it in the title, but I just want to reiterate, we are live. So you can ask questions, so please do so. Not only can you ask questions, but if you've developed some great best practices, please share them. We have a couple people watching that chat box, and we will share the questions, try to answer them, and we will also make sure that we share your best practices if you are comfortable sharing them. Because right now I'd say, not to be cheesy or High School Musical-like, but we're all in this together. And so we need to help each other out stay safe. This is bigger than competing in the senior living world with the nursing home down the street.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to point out, if you have things to share, we would love to hear about them. Okay, so we have discussed developing an effective standard operating procedure. Is there a question? Oh, keep going. All right.
One was just on sharing resources, which I've already addressed.
Perfect. All right, so preparing a safe environment. One of the first things I thought about, Rob, that I know you can answer is, when we're preparing a safe environment and picking where we're going to have these visitors set up, what are the hardest things or areas to clean? I think that should be considered.
Well, I think that's one of the things we need to consider. I would say once we pick a spot or an area, we want to make sure that, one, it's easily accessible, so we don't want to go through a maze throughout a community to get to a visitor area. We want to make sure it's something in close proximity. They can get to it without venturing and interacting with other of the community. What we have in there, we want to make sure that it's easily be able to be cleaned and disinfected. Now what that means is I'm not going to bring in the big comfy couch, lazy boy recliner with the plush, the lure, because we can't disinfect that.
And I think that sometimes is easily forgotten.
It
right?
is.
I mean,
soft surfaces are very difficult to deal with, and there are no soft surface disinfectants. There are some soft surface sanitizers, but let's remember, you're not killing 100% of everything in there.
You bring up a good point, Rob, and I always completely forget. Identify with our audience, in case we're not all environmental services gurus. What's the difference between sanitizing and disinfecting?
Sanitizing is taking the number of microorganisms down to a safe level, which they determine is like 99.99%. It's almost 100%, but not quite. We still have some that are out there, and if you know anything about microorganisms, they can multiply rapidly.
Yeah.
So on a food contact surface, we're sanitizing, we're getting them down to a safe level, and we deem that sanitized and ready to go. When we're disinfecting, we're usually dealing with nastier things. Obviously, coronavirus is one of the nastier things we have to deal with. We want to make sure we're killing that 100%. So on hard surfaces, or even furniture that has like a plastic coating, you can effectively disinfect that surface. And you want to apply your disinfectant, let it stay on for the contact time, and you're assured that I've killed everything on there. You get into something of a soft surface and you can spray on the soft surface sanitizer, you're probably not going to get everything that's in that fabric killed. So.
Kind of gross.
Yeah.
I mean, we discussed this a little before. I mean, you could kind of go back to the good old days when you used to visit Grandma and Grandpa as a child.
I wasn't allowed in that room. Grandma had the front room with the plastic covered furniture, but that would That would work,
'cause
so.
then you could disinfect that plastic cover. And then I guess one thing too, I always feel like one of the most important things to really reiterate to any management out there is the importance of that kill time that Rob's referring to. I know we've been asked, well, this says it's a 2-minute kill time. That seems a little short for killing something as nasty as COVID, right?
So, I mean, there are some that are out there, and they're usually the harder ones to find. Majority of the disinfectants we're seeing are between 5 and 10 minutes. And I guess, why would you want to rush something
That's
that
so
important?
Yeah.
So,
And they need to keep it wet.
they do. So
Okay.
you just can't spray it on and count to 10 and it's already dried up in 3. So they need to make sure they put it on, and they may have to put it on a second time if it's starting to dry up. So.
And this is where we'll touch on this at the end, but it's so important, especially because I know it is hard to have the correct levels of staff working for you in normal times, but especially now. So you might have to have people who aren't usually cleaning these areas a part of that cleaning team.
Absolutely, they're
So
going to have to help out.
They're going, yeah, and they not necessarily know this importance of the kill time and what it means to keep things wet. I mean, I've been in this business for a long time, and it took me a while to go, oh, you have to keep respraying it to keep it wet? That's what it means. So I can't reiterate the importance of training, which we can help with. We'll talk about at the end. And then I would almost, 5 minutes, 10 minutes is a very long time, especially when you're having people who aren't used to being in that environmental services role helping. You might as well set a timer or something so that it's a cheat sheet for them, even like an egg timer, right? Spray it on, it's still not dinged, spray it on again as they're doing other stuff, situating the room.
That's why it's really important when you're scheduling these visitations that you allow for that time. So when the next group comes in, rest assured that's clean, disinfected area.
All right, well, I'm glad we discussed that. Some people who are joining us may go, oh, for gosh sakes, we learned that before and we've learned that forever. But
And we're going to keep talking about
yeah,
it over and
I
over.
mean, how many times do we talk about washing your hands? Which we'll get to.
Yeah.
So, but keeping on with this
So,
process.
and having a safe spot doesn't always necessarily mean it has to be inside.
Correct.
I mean, obviously, if you have a room right off the entryway that you can dedicate for a visitor, safe visitor area, it'd be great. And if you have like a courtyard that you could
Gazebo.
possibly, or a gazebo, utilize that. Once again, it can be isolated from other people. You can still go out and clean and disinfect it.
Mhm.
It gives you one more area to allow visitors to come in as long as you can manage that.
We've heard of people, they use fence as a natural barrier. Not a wooden fence that you can't see someone through, but just a chain link fence. This area is a visitation area, and this is where you take the resident on nice days, and then their loved one can sit on the other side of the fence and they can talk right through that fence. You can also create your own barriers if we want to discuss this, because you might say, okay, we're going to only have adults, so people listen and follow the guidelines. But if you haven't seen your mom in 2 months, and let's say she isn't sick to the point that you could visit her before, but she's very sick, the first thing I would want to do if I saw my mom again is give her a hug. And so you might need to create a way to stop that. So,
And you don't want to do it to be insensitive. You want to do it
right,
as total protection
right.
for them.
And once again, that's part of that whole process of communication before. And what we did here is, now you can purchase these for sure,
Right.
but we were lucky enough to have a
Craftsman.
A part of a family member that works for us, literally put this together over the weekend. I mean, when I say over the weekend, literally we asked on like Friday afternoon if it could be done, and ta-da, it showed up. So if you've got handy people at your community, you can put these together. This weekend I saw one of our customers had 3 large ones, and they were outside. So they were about the size of one of those big chalkboards you see in at school. and it was kind of used as a barrier so they could be outside and see their loved ones.
And we got to remember, we're still practicing social distancing, and that doesn't go out the window because we're visiting a family member.
Right,
That family member is going to have to still continue to live in that community,
right,
and so we don't want to bring anything in that could possibly infect them, that where they can infect other people. Because you know what happens once this gets into a community? It's like lighting a match in a dry
exactly.
forest. So.
And if you've been there and you've experienced that, you can
Right.
vouch for that. And I will say too, it's good to have this as a reminder because 6 feet, and we're not used to that. And I would say even after 2 months of practicing this, I this weekend met a new neighbor, and the first thing I did was reach out my hand, and my husband goes, "Erica," and I was like, "Oh, sorry, I'm sorry." Like, 36 years of handshaking, and now we're supposed to not do it. So I think helping with that guidance for what that safe social distancing is. And once again, you might want to include that in the communication going out, just so you know we are practicing social distancing.
There will be a barrier up.
Yes, just so they're aware of that and not surprised. So I would say that would be a good thing to consider. Also, we talked about natural barriers. We said outside, but if you've got like a roofed patio, that's a great way to, even as it warms up and there might be sprinkles outside, you can still use that area no matter what for those visiting times. Now, we just said it. Oh, visitors, should they be able to, we talked about escorting them to the right location, but what if they don't have an escort and they decide their visit's done early? Is there a way should
Well,
they be able to walk anywhere?
I don't think, well, personally, I think you're going to want to control how much area that they can go in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, we're thinking about everybody in your community, not just that one visitor. So
Right.
if I come in and all of a sudden nature calls and I'll halfway through my visit with Mom, I need to go. I'm going to need to have somebody take me to a dedicated rest area, restroom, something that's available for me that would have to be clean and disinfected after I used it, and then escort me back. We definitely would want to have some signage to make sure that people aren't wandering and slipping around saying, well, I know Mom's neighbor June is in here, I'm going to slip over and wave to her,
Exactly,
So-
going around. And then talking about, once again, those signage, making sure you've identified that visitor restroom, reminding them, please notify staff after restroom use for proper cleaning. It's a protection against COVID. Just reminding them things have changed. You don't just get to grab the key, go to the bathroom, and you're done for the day. You do have to have proper cleaning afterwards. So I think signage is very important, directing them where to go, maybe saying this is an area not allowed for visitors would be a good idea, or this is a restricted area, just to consider, is it confusing? Are you a large community where it could be easy to walk in the wrong
Right.
spot? So
I've been
once
in
again,
some of those and I've
yeah.
gotten lost in them.
Oh my
They're
gosh,
just so
turned
huge.
around, exactly. So kind of consider those areas. Can you have signs to reinforce that? An easy path from check-in. Also, hand washing. I just don't want to itch my hand, but should we consider washing our hands?
You know what, I think part of the communication would discuss, one, proper hygiene, know that you want to make sure that you've washed your hands prior to getting there, but I think we should still have the ability, so you made me itch my forehead
I know.
too.
Once you talk about proper hygiene, then it's like your face and your eyes itch and
Now,
your hair.
you may have as simple as a hand sanitizer station. You might be fortunate wherever your visitation room is, you might have a place that they can wash their hands.
If it's a former activities room that you guys aren't using, so you decide that's the area, a lot of times there's sinks in there
Right.
and you can identify that. Make sure you clean the sink
Absolutely.
after it's been used.
Now, there have been some new advancements in portable sinks that are available that are really nice. They just look like a regular cabinet with a sink, plugs into a 110 outlet, and you fill up a 4.5-gallon jug underneath, and it allows you to wash your hands right there. Comes a little soap dispenser and everything. So every community could make that decision.
Right.
If they feel comfortable with just a hand sanitizer, you know, and making sure that people are doing it properly and just not the quick, let's go, you know. We've talked about that before a couple months ago, I think.
How many seconds? Think about it in your head. Because I will say, I just did some training on hand washing, and they made it sound like you could count your rinse as part of that 20 seconds.
I know there's a lot of different, I think, once again, this is a very important deal. Why do you want to shortchange it
5 seconds.
for even 5 seconds? So.
Exactly. So just some considerations. There are things out there that can help put those solutions in place if you're in a bind and you're not as safe as you want to be. So they're coming up with a lot of different things now that you kind of go, huh. Like I was driving through my favorite donut shop, and they now have, you know, plexiglass over the drive-through, and it's like, well, duh, why did it take COVID to come up with that concept? What a simple, easy way to do things. So.
Well, and I think COVID's changed our whole thinking. So,
Right.
you know, some of you might be thinking, the family members are not going to like this at all. I think you'll be surprised how many family members will embrace these type of, I don't want to call them regulations, but just protocols to follow.
Yeah, yes.
Because it is about having a safe environment and protecting their loved ones and the other loved ones in the community. So.
Well, and senior living has taken a huge spotlight during COVID. So if they haven't realized how important it is to keep your community safe, it's pretty crazy because it's talked about quite frequently how hard it is once it gets into your communities and how you guys are taking care of the most vulnerable population. What can we do to keep them safe?
Right.
So, I agree. I think you'll be surprised maybe the difference in some of your family members, hopefully for your sake, because you don't need any more challenges right now, especially disgruntled family members. Those aren't very good. But also notify staff once again so they can clean everything afterwards. And that's going back to that training process. They aren't used to cleaning the public restroom after every use.
Right.
Correct? That's probably not something
Or
that's done.
a visitor area after someone's come to visit. It's going to take some different thought, and I think they get into a routine, and we just keep enforcing it, and it becomes every day.
I also want to consider, and we haven't really touched on this, we're touching on it next. So I think we've covered a lot about preparing that safe environment. What does it look like? How are you going to choose it? Things to consider. Once again, we're just trying to offer some thought-provoking concepts here. Now we're going to communicate and implement it. We already discussed a little bit the importance of getting that information out to your family and your staff and your residents. I think make sure your staff really understands this process right now so that they can, no offense, but there are some communities you walk in and I know everyone's busy, so staff aren't found, and if they see someone, they really try hard to just get on with their day and not try to help you with customer service. This isn't about customer service. It's a lot that Martin Brothers discusses, good customer service when you have guests walk in. This is about safety. So if they see someone and you haven't seen anyone but your team and your residents for 2 months. So it's pretty easy right now to identify someone that should be there in an area. The importance of, hi, how are you? Can I help you with something, to make sure that we put them in the right direction. And that's staff training. So once again, the importance of staff training, I think, with that communication.
And they need to understand everything we've talked about. Why they need to understand the whys. We're doing this because, and I think they'll buy into it, they'll understand it, and everyone will be a part of it. So.
Well, and staff are just as scared to get it into the community. So absolutely. Now we talked a little bit about that proper cleaning products, but I think that is something for sure for implementation. And that's where we can come in to help, right, is making sure we aren't using Pine Sol for cleaning during this.
Or I like the smell of bleach, so I'm going to use bleach everything. So we want to make sure we got the right procedures with the right products and doing it the proper way. So,
And the proper dilution for the right
Correct.
products.
correct.
So, and that's all about training, guys. I think we're almost saying training more than hand washing in an environmental services discussion. But
I'll keep preaching it. We are resources. Let us come in and help you.
Yep.
So,
and we have a lot of resources.
and we can,
online.
I should say, let us come in. We can do a lot of this stuff virtually with you.
Yes.
We don't have to physically come to
Right
your
now
location
we
and
can.
do it. Right. So we're setting up a lot of virtual consultations, and if it's easy, and we're going to explain how you can do that here at the end of this.
And everyone's getting more used to that. So our team for sure. And then promote those PPE requirements. That's going to be, and once again, I think going back to what Rob considered, everyone's used to wearing masks in public now. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise or an insult to continue
Right.
that into the community.
I mean, there are plenty of stores that will not let you in unless you have a mask.
Or pay $1. So absolutely.
Right.
So, and we talked about the importance of that signage to keep visitors safe. I think that, is with communication, it always helps to have signs everywhere. And then one thing that was pointed out to us was making sure if you do visiting hours during the day, Monday through Friday, you have usually your team that's always there. You have a management team as well, but the weekends get a little sparser usually. Maybe you guys are different, but if you're a community where no management on staff, and sometimes you get a little more call-ins than usual, especially now that it's getting nice out and the states are reopening, there are some things to do. You might want to consider, how are we going to do this on the weekend? Because like I wouldn't be able to go see mom or dad from 11 to 4 Monday through Friday. I can on Saturday and Sunday. So if you're going to have weekend hours, how are we going to make sure that we're keeping those weekend hours just as safe?
Right. Having someone from leadership that can, and maybe it's a rotation. Maybe
Yeah.
this weekend the DON is on staff during visitor hours, or next weekend it's the administrator, or next weekend it's
Dietary manager.
dietary manager, or whoever.
Just
And
to
I
make
think
sure.
if you rotate it, no one, and if, depending on your window of visitation, it's not like they'd have to be there the
From
entire.
8 a.m. to 5
Right,
p.m.
they're there just to make sure that they can provide guidance and leadership during that visitation time.
And everything is being done that we're talking
Right.
about. When you set up that SOP, that's followed. That's going to be so important for you guys to stay safe during this. So, I mean, I think that's for sure something to consider as well, to make sure Monday through Sunday, it's safe no matter what day you guys come and things are being done correctly and followed. So, we forgot. I talked about a lot, I feel
We
like.
did, I wanted to say something, because we talked about communication in the very beginning, possible sources, and obviously most places are getting into social media and the Facebook and even on their website. But what a great thing would this to be to consistently promote on your Facebook. Another great week of visitation, re-emphasizing the practices that you're doing, showing that you're an actual leader in this type of procedures. And
Right.
showing that
Bragging about all
right,
the
showing the
work
happy
you're-
faces of the loved ones with their visitors in a safe, balanced environment.
Yes, exactly. I think that's not only communicating to family, but just to the community.
Right.
There's a lot of media likes bad stuff, so you wanna fight that, and I think that's a great way to do that for sure. Show what you're doing.
Right.
So definitely consider that. But we also, one resource we didn't talk about that you will be getting is a lot of our thoughts here, considerations will be put together in the best practices. Once again, consider these things so that if you didn't take notes and for some reason you don't want to watch this again, it will be what? Our good bad jokes. It will be in a nice, beautiful marketed piece for you guys to refer back to for sure. But did we have any questions? I want to ask us before we finally unveil what we teased about earlier. Nothing? Well, that can be good or bad. I don't know. But Training, we talked about training your staff, training.
So is this where I get to brag up my staff?
This is where
So-
you get to brag up your,
So part of our
knowledge.
solutions center at Martin Brothers, which I'm very proud of, and I think as a company we're all very proud of, is we have 9 certified, experienced staff members that are trained in cleaning, disinfecting practices throughout multiple type of operations, but we do a lot of focus on senior living.
yes.
Some of you probably know who they are, but if you don't, it's a perfect time to get to know them. And then you might want to say, well, how do I get to know them? Well, we've developed through the work of a pretty cool lab, a way that you can book time with these people. And we're going to show you a graphic here about how you can get on, and you can pick a consultation and pick a team member that you can meet with. And we've got them laid out by the different types of consultations, whether you want to know about cleaning and sanitation, maybe you're interested in some cleaning equipment,
Training.
Staff training, things like that.
Mhm.
So you can pick what kind of consultation you want, then you can pick a team member, and you may know them, but we also have them kind of by state. So if you're in Minnesota or Iowa or Wisconsin, you can pick somebody up in that area, and they work amongst each other. So if they feel like you might be a better person than them, they'll reschedule it. But one way or another, you're going to see available times. You can book it. They will contact you and say, tell me a little bit about what you're looking for. They will set up we utilize Teams, so all you need to have is a way to get on the internet with a camera. So say you have a desktop, you can utilize a cell phone.
Most laptops.
Most laptops have them, so they'll set it up to where you just click on the link, you'll join in, and you'll have a face-to-face consultation with them. They'll probably get your DSR, your food salesman involved, so they can listen to some of the things you're needing and wanting, and can also help assist you in that. We have a lot of different resources. We just finished a module on competencies, environmental services that would also be available, and these are things
Talks about the correct sequence of proper
And actually,
sequence
there's
on and off.
quite a bit of those competencies that I think most staff could share the whole thing.
Especially if you're going to do
Right.
something like safe cleaning of
So-
a visiting area.
All I can say is that we've worked very hard to develop a lot of the resources. We have some very qualified, experienced specialists to be able to help. We just want you to utilize us and take advantage of those and get us in there into your communities. And like I said, I know a lot of senior living does a very good job. They have their processes in place, but you do have some turnover. You do, that environmental director left and a new one came in, and they came from a place that they questioned what we were doing. Whatever it is, we can come in, we know the regulations, we know, proper products that will work. We're not going to go in and say this is the only way to do it, but we will work with you and your staff and help you get the right standard operating procedures in place for your environmental services, your cleaning, your disinfecting, those type of things.
It never hurts to have someone come in and just assess what you're doing and see if there's ways to improve. That's for sure.
And
And because how much, if you work with Martin Brothers, how much does that cost to do that?
zero.
$0. So, not many things are free in this world, but if you work with us, this is value add for sure. So I want to
Absolutely.
point that out. So don't be afraid to take advantage of that service for sure.
And my
Especially
guys
now.
they're not sugarcoaters. So if you're doing something that they question, they'll question. And they're not doing it to be mean or
Keeping you safe.
we're just trying to make sure that you're doing it right. And I think sometimes that's a hard thing it's hard for me to hear. If I'm doing something wrong, I don't want to hear it. But if it's going to affect the outcome,
It's
I need to
important.
hear it. So
Right. We're not saying we don't like your hair. We're saying that you could get someone sick if you keep doing this.
right.
Totally different. So, I think we wanted to end on that. Once again, we talked about a lot of stuff. I just want to reiterate, you will be getting the CEU certificate for a half-hour sanitation. Now you can see why we were able to get that half-hour of general. For CDMs, we'll be sending the matrix, the cleaning matrix to take a look at, the best practices, and then a couple sample posters that you can utilize for sure. Once again, if you have any questions after you go through this, maybe you saw this and you're thinking, our state's pretty far away from starting to implement these phases, and then let's say it does happen, you need some help or a refresher, reach out to someone on your Martin Brothers team, your senior living team, Rob's solutions team, and let us come and help you and be a part of that process to keep you safe.
Well, just know when this whole thing hit, don't we all wish we had a couple months to prepare for it?
Right.
Now might be the time that you start having those conversations with your staff, thinking about your settings, what could make the best sense,
Yes.
best practices. So take advantage of the time because sometimes decisions are made overnight and boom, you got people knocking on the door want to come in. So.
Exactly. We want to say one last thing. We want to say thank you for all your hard work in doing what you do. It's such
Thank
a
you.
hard job. I mean, the industry, senior living industry, is such a hard job and career to be a part of. You obviously love the residents, which they deserve. We're so glad to have people love our loved ones as much as we do, and we know it's a tough job. And that was before COVID.
Right.
And now it's just
Exemplified.
exponentially. I mean, so much.
It is.
So we genuinely appreciate what you're going through and doing for all of our loved ones. And we just wanted to say thank you from Martin Brothers. If you need anything, let us know and stay safe.